I'm feeling good about CJ Stroud, everybody, and I know that's not in fashion right this moment because the offense hasn't looked all that incredible. But after being in West Virginia for a few days and watching some of the progress they made while they were there, but then also in going back and watching CJ Stroud's press conference from a couple days ago, which I didn't have a chance to listen to in its entirety at the time, even though I was like 7 feet away from him, there's a process here, a word that's going to get used a couple times in his press conference answers. But also, I've got a text from John Harris I'm going to share with you about some of the things that happened this week and where they are in the process of teaching this offense. CJ Stroud on how hard it is to take lessons away from plays when the defense is succeeding at practice. And I'm going to tell you what my biggest takeaway is after this answer from CJ Stroud.
Yeah, like it's the difference. It's the balance between being a competitor and then being like, fall in love with the process and not or the progress and not like the result in the moment. Because sometimes you can throw a ball and look like a bad ball, but bad communication between, myself and the receiver. So that's just like one point of emphasis on, like having to work through those kinks because that's what comes in with like a newer scheme. So. But yeah, other than that, like, you still don't want to be turning the ball over or, like see bad plays. But I think we've gotten past that part in camp and, now it's just like more competitive on both sides. And, but yeah, you got to be able to still compete and like hold yourself to a standard that you're not going to, make mistakes. But when those things happen, learning from them and just having that balance.
100%. There will be kinks. It's like the old movie, There Will Be Blood. There will be kinks in the process. Tom Brady, when he went to Tampa, there were kinks in the process early on. And I'm not saying that CJ Stroud is Tom Brady yet. I'll give him 6 weeks. But what I saw in West Virginia on Monday, it was ugly all around. It wasn't just CJ. But the questions that people have had, myself included, over the first couple of weeks was, okay, we know there's going to be kinks, but it does seem like there's times where CJ is just not as accurate as he typically is. There's 2 things about this. One is that like accuracy generally does not fade. For the longest time in the NFL, people thought quarterbacks either were born accurate or they weren't. We've seen with guys like Josh Allen and Dak Prescott that you can actually improve accuracy more than previously people thought was capable. But generally, you don't lose your accuracy unless there's an injury or something. And I think that's where I was a little bit nervous, given his shoulder soreness in camp, given the injuries last year and how it might have affected his accuracy. I was worried that he might be working through something. But watching the progress this week, some of the errant throws, it's true. CJ's not making excuses there. There's times where it's very clear that, okay, the wide receivers, the young receivers, the tight ends, CJ himself, they're just not quite on the same page yet when it comes to executing this offense versus a very, very good defense. So that part of it, after watching the offense improve and in the scrimmage do some genuinely good things, they sprung wide receivers open using play action because the offensive line was playing physically. I'm still nervous about the offensive line, don't get me wrong. But as far as CJ himself, I could start to see it come to fruition a little bit. And part of that is I think maybe there was a little bit more game planning against the Texans defense in that scrimmage. This is one chunk of CJ answer on how exciting it is to see offensive coordinator Nick Caley's scheme progress beyond training camp.
Sometimes in our scheme, our defense, it's not going to work against them. But just to get the reps down, even though like it might not even work, like it helps. And I think he's very positive when it comes to that. He understands that. So I think it's been great, to just get down our foundation, and now we're building from like more of a game plan emphasis, and I think that'll be fun.
Something, and again, I'll read that text from John Harris later. The thing I am most comfortable about, whether I stated it or not, my biggest takeaway is that I do think this has all been part of the process. And especially on Tuesday and on Thursday, when the offensive line started showing a lot more physicality, there were just more examples of them pushing the defensive line back. I know a lot of you had questions about, hey, if the offense is struggling this much, is it an indication that maybe this scheme isn't actually all that effective? I saw a lot of evidence of it in the scrimmage especially. If you want to have guys that are moving people up front, if you want to be double teaming defensive tackles and playing a power type of football and using that to set up play action. Nico Collins was wide open on one play in the red zone. Dalton Schultz was wide open on one play in the end zone. Another examples of guys either in the flats or down the middle just being wide open, and not just in the quick game like we had seen previously in camp. And I think now that they've installed everything, and now especially that they're moving into seeing preseason, opponents in the preseason or the Carolina Panthers next week in the joint practices, you still don't necessarily game plan a lot for like the way you would in the regular season, but the style of defense and the defensive coordinator you're facing, and you're going to tailor your play selection to that. You can tailor your pass protection to it a little bit. So I think it's going to continue to look better. We still don't know what the ceiling is going to be, but I think it's going to look better. This is CJ on if training camp has felt like his rookie year due to learning a new offensive system.
Yeah, it's a little different just because, I know, more coverages. I know, style trees. I know coordinators. I played against a good amount of, different schemes. So it's a little easier, and then it's a lot of similarities from what Nick's bringing to what we're doing in the past. So it's a little similar in those lights, but it's not as hard as my rookie year was. Learning Chinese. This year is a little bit of that, but not as much. It's a little easier.
Just kept thinking, don't pull a Shaq. Don't pull a Shaq. Don't do your Chinese. Don't do your Chinese impression when talking about Yao Ming or something. There, I get the metaphor. Yao Ming and CJ Stroud. Yao teaching CJ Stroud Chinese. That's put that in my big book of podcast ideas. I was texting with John Harris because he said they're style trees, not route tree, but style trees. I thought this was really interesting because he referenced this a couple of times in this press conference about learning about the defensive coordinators themselves. So style tree, typically the way I understand it, usually when I've heard it used is, okay, a coaching tree. And, with a West Coast offense, okay, you got the original West Coast offense, and then it evolved into this with Mike Shanahan, then Gary Kubiak did this, and then Kyle Shanahan did that. This is the way Mike McCarthy runs it. That's on the offensive side of the ball. Likewise, defensively, you got Pete Carroll type defenses. You've got Bill Belichick style and all those things. So when you start to learn the coordinators, you can kind of get some common themes and get a feel for, all right, what this guy might be thinking. I loved hearing that from CJ because I think it hints at him really learning the game, taking that next step at learning the next level of how coaches call a game. John Harris, and I checked with John Harris and be like, hey, when he says style tree, do you think he's talking about the coaching tree element of everything I just talked about? And what John said was really encouraging to me because it speaks back to the process. The way they've installed the offense has helped. They've installed it very intentionally, apparently. That's why it seemed the defense had their number. But when they had free reign to pull from all facets in the scrimmage on Thursday, they had more success. That's what it looked like. That's what it looked like to me. And it was, it looked more smooth. It looked like there were fewer hitches and kinks. The pass protection was more sound. It wasn't perfect. Like Will Anderson is still Will Anderson. Danielle Hunter is still Danielle Hunter. Tommy Togiai is Tommy freaking Togiai. That's with the 2s and 3s, but I'll talk about him on the preview for the game tomorrow. That's what it looks like, and I just didn't want to go there and just make excuses for all bad play by saying, hey, it's part of the process. But they made progress steadily, and then in a scrimmage situation really showed evidence of it, and I like that. I feel better and better about CJ right now. I don't think we're going to see him in the game tomorrow, but the practice versus Carolina will be really interesting. That's when usually the coaches love to see. They like to use those joint practices because they can get a lot of reps in specific situations versus good players, but without the same risk of injury. Nobody's going to hit CJ Stroud in that combined practice. If somebody does hit CJ Stroud, the practice is going to be over because that defense is going to attack CJ Gardner-Johnson, coming off of a hospital bed or a stretcher or a walking boot or whatever the hell report has him as his injury right now. I'm waiting for them to say it was appendicitis and then have that retracted. You're gonna, the defense would end the drill immediately. The defense would rush onto the field and murder everybody. The offensive players, the offensive line this year with the new culture, the offensive line might actually stick up for CJ and come up and start throwing down, okay? Not like last year where they couldn't be bothered to go help out. Raising the volume a little too much. Blood pressure, Seth. What areas does he think that taking more ownership of the team will help him? I liked this.
Yeah, just being able to see things that maybe coaches don't see. Being on the field, I'm able to have a different point of view. I think that'll be helpful for our guys, and it's still not going to just be easy just because we say we're doing it. I'm gonna make mistakes. Also gonna do things right. So it's just learning from my mistakes and trying to be better.
Get that back there. Lost my show prep. Got excited. The taking more ownership of the offense and being able to see things from the player perspective. We heard Bobby Slowick a couple times last year, and this is something any coach might say is, hey, when we made this call, and I'm thinking specifically of it was the Minnesota game, actually. We were anticipating cover 2, and they showed cover 3 or vice versa, whatever it might be. That's where one of the real values of having a quarterback that can sometimes figure out, all right, look, we called a cover 2 beater, but I can tell by the position of the safety or his body language, because I've done so much film study, that it is not going to be cover 2. It's going to be cover 3, or it's going to be single high or something like that. And then you can either tweak the play or change the play completely, and you're not stuck in this situation where everything has to work out just right. A lot of times in the old West Coast offense, the philosophy is, well, whatever the coverage is, there's an answer within the play. And that sounds great on paper, and back in the old day when defenses were more static, when they didn't necessarily change and shift and disguise as much, I think that was true. The problem these days is if the quarterback is surprised by something in the coverage, and there's one thing that could work to fix you or save you, that everything's got to be perfect with that. And then the defense might have added another wrinkle to it that makes it a lot more difficult. So to really combat modern defenses, I think you have to have more command from your quarterback. If you want to get the true top tier upper echelon play, that's what you're going to have to get. And that's what they're working on right now. Question on if there's any defenses or games from last year that have helped him grow. And this goes back to a little bit of the style tree element.
I think every game you can find something. It's really just like learning the tree and like who the defensive coordinator is. Is like see a D-line guy, see a backer guy, see a DB guy. Because a lot of times, like they try to like make plays for their babies, which is their like position group. And that's something that I try to remember. Sometimes guys just call whatever, and you don't know. So it's a million different type of defenses, and you try to just learn your foundational stuff and then grow from there. So it's really about what you do to help control that.
And this also goes back to that constant battle between overanalyzing and just going out and playing football. So you don't want to overload CJ with any of that, but it's really important that you understand when you're facing a defense. If you just looked at a spreadsheet and said, well, this team plays cover 3 38% of the time and cover 2 this amount of the time, it's always different. It's different by coordinator. It's different by the individuals that are playing the game. Like you might go in and you think you're seeing cover 2, but you got to really know exactly how those safeties handle it in cover 2. And one of them might just they don't play it the right way in certain situations, but because of that, you're playing it like he does play it the right way, and you end up throwing an interception. It's nothing worse than getting beat because of another player actually being incompetent and you doing the right thing. And from a defensive lineman's perspective, this is sometimes when you go against bad offensive linemen, you'll make the mistake sometimes of if you hit let's talk about pass rushers and not me personally, like really good pass rushers. You hit a move, and versus a really good player, it might feel like, oh, I got to counter. I got to spin back inside. But versus the bad player is still back right there, and you'll spin right into him because he wasn't good enough to bite on your initial move, and you overthink it. So you just gotta really know the individuals that you're playing against. And I think CJ loves that kind of stuff. Let's see some questions. If I get to you guys, it's making it harder for me to see who the members are in this new system that I'm using, although I like the overall quality a lot better than the system I was using before. I know I'd seen one of you said that why didn't they sign Brandon Scherf? It's relevant to the current situation with CJ Gardner-Johnson because Justin Simmons is still out there. But what was the question last year? Why wouldn't they sign Justin Simmons? Why wouldn't they sign Justin Simmons? I don't get it. And the answer really was twofold, I think. One, in general, you just can't go out and sign everybody. You make acquisitions and free agency and spend a good amount of money there. And then you've also got, and the second part of the twofold answer is you've got draft picks. And Kalen Bullock is now being noticed by people around the league as well. One of the most promising young safeties in the league. So Kalen Bullock, they went and they got. It worked out for them to get CJ Gardner-Johnson this offseason. And now we don't know exactly what's going to happen with CJ Gardner-Johnson. Justin Simmons is still out there. Brandon Scherff was an interesting one. Because Brandon Scherff sat out there forever on the market last year before Minnesota got him. And then this year, Jacksonville gave him a hefty contract. But Jacksonville also gave Eric Murray a hefty contract. So I think for the price that Jacksonville was willing to pay versus what Brandon Scherff is at this stage in his career, it's not a fun answer, but it just might not have been the most responsible thing to do financially. And that they want to develop some of these younger guys and see how everybody looks in a new scheme. And I would also point out that you can always add more offensive linemen. George Fant, fact check me on this. I want to say Fant was signed like in the second week of training camp, the year that he came in. And then looked bad in training camp. He looked really bad. I was out watching George Fant in training camp and thinking, like, boy, if this guy's our swing tackle, we're going to be in trouble. Man, and then he ended up being just great and had to play a lot that year. So I don't have a great answer for specifically why they didn't sign Brandon Scherff, but they just didn't sign Brandon Scherff. There's always those guys out there, just like Justin Simmons last year. His Blake Fisher really looked as bad as everyone is saying. I was hoping he would start at some point. I was hoping that as well. My one question about Blake Fisher might be, I don't know if he was dealing with an offseason injury or anything, but he had slimmed down a little bit, I guess, was the reports at OTAs, or he looked more svelte. My impression of him on seeing him for the first time is that he did not make that kind of body transformation that you're hoping to see out of a guy that was considered a project and maybe needed to mature a little bit. And then he doesn't really play with a wide base. I'm not seeing some of the fundamentally sound things that he needs to do if he's progressing. So maybe he's dealing with an injury or something. I mean, he's known as a hard worker and he's a smart guy. So I don't know exactly what's going on with Blake Fisher right now, but he hasn't done a great job. And it's just, he's not even a part of the conversation right now. Evan, I am using Ecamm, ECAMM. And the nice thing about it is it's not like I was using StreamYard before, but which was cloud-based. And when I tried to play videos, especially, or do any kind of film breakdown on a live stream, the quality was just crap. There was a lag. Sometimes my video quality wasn't any good. So this is all on hardware. We love you, Seth. I'm joshing you, and you have the zone of a matrix. I didn't see the previous comments, so I'm not even going to take offense to whatever you were joshing me about. Do you see us being aggressive for Simmons if CJ? Okay, I have no complaints with the new system I'm using. It's just that I haven't learned it well enough that I've got glitches. I'm like the Texans offense right now. I'm going to be the greatest show on turf in terms of using this software by about week 6 or week 7. But there's going to be some glitches along the way as I learn it. Do you see us being aggressive for Simmons if CJ is projected to miss a lot of time? I think there's a chance. Now, the other problem is, or the other consideration is that Simmons didn't play so great last year in Atlanta. But he was it's classic. All right, was the scheme exactly right? Was it more of an Atlanta problem than a Simmons problem? I don't know. And that's a decision that I'm guessing they're having conversations about Justin Simmons, depending on what the CJ Gardner-Johnson injury is. For those of you who don't know, Jimmy Ward was arrested yesterday, or at least it was reported yesterday. It wasn't for a new offense per se. It was because he tested positive for alcohol, which apparently he is not allowed to have as conditions for whatever his situation is right now. But he says that he didn't know that he wasn't allowed to have alcohol. It's not ideal. It's not like he went out and committed a new offense or something, but it's just it doesn't make me feel any better about the availability of Jimmy Ward. And the other problem with Jimmy Ward is that he's been injured every year, and he's approaching his mid-30s, and I don't think you should anticipate that he's going to be available for 17 games plus the playoffs. The Simmons is 100% in play, and I think they've had conversations about him. We just don't know exactly what's going on with CJ Gardner-Johnson. Oh, did I miss Ward being released? Okay. I might have missed this as I was doing my show and prepping up and all of that other stuff. And I got to find out what, Mr. Sum 41. All right, now I used Sum 41 for a video like 2 years ago. Is that, or are you talking about David Anderson? That's either in reference to me using that Sum 41 track a while back, or because David Anderson looks a little bit like that little singer from Sum 41. Darktooth, tell me about Sum 41. Because Sum 41 was kind of like that new age punk, right? And I wasn't sure if is it bad to like Sum 41? Because I like Sum 41, and Sum 41 wasn't around until I was long out of the age of actually being taken seriously as somebody who likes punk music or anything. Is it bad to like Sum 41? I love little suburban white dudes whining about their parents, and that being a genre of music. All right. It's like, nobody's got it harder than me. My dad wouldn't buy me a Ferrari. Yeah, that kind of crap. Love it. It's not as politically acceptable anymore. Okay, you love Sum 41. Good. Fat Lip is the song. That is the one. Fat Lip still gets me going. Fat Lip gets me going. I'm going to listen to it before the game tomorrow. I'm going to listen to Fat Lip before the pregame, which starts at noon Eastern, I believe. And that will be the greatest show ever. Quick story. We played. I was telling John McClane about New Slang by the Shins and how it's one of the most depressing songs I've ever heard in my life, and that was even before I knew the backstory about it. So one day we had John McClane in studio. This is when I was with Meltzer, and Meltzer wanted to play New Slang for John McClane, and we played it. We got like 7 seconds into it where it's like, and McClane said, "Never play that song again. I just never play it. That's the most depressing thing I've ever heard." And I hadn't prefaced it to John. I think I sprung it on him, and I wanted his opinion, and he agreed with me that it was the most depressing thing he'd ever heard. And yeah, I can't stop listening. It's that pleasant melancholy, or sometimes you just want to be depressed. You just want to be like, let me wallow a little bit, all right? And then I'll spring forward and be bubbly Seth that everybody knows and loves. See, ban Darktooth. I almost had accidentally banned you because I hit a button I wasn't familiar with. All right, so Jimmy Ward's been released. Wasn't released. All right. I don't know what the other guy's talking about. Pics of Jimmy at the facility an hour ago. Come on, fake news. We've had so much fake news. This is what happened with the CJ Gardner-Johnson thing. So yesterday, I'm driving back from West Virginia. I'm driving from West Virginia and up to Pittsburgh. Long story. But I was driving, and I didn't really have any news from camp or anything. I stopped, and I saw that a bunch of people had jumped on a fake Schefter tweet, a fake Adam Schefter tweet about it being a torn Achilles tendon. I saw some legitimate media people got by that. So I made sure, okay, nothing. And then I did my live stream saying, hey, we still don't know about CJ Gardner-Johnson. And then 1 minute after I get off the live stream, Aaron Wilson tweets that it's a torn ACL. So I went in the comments and I said, hey, everybody, sorry, this came out. I drive for another couple hours. I checked my Twitter machine, and no, lo and behold, that report was inaccurate. Aaron doesn't usually make those mistakes. I don't know what happened, but my God, we just stop it. Stop feeding me the fake news, damn it. Oh, all right, already released from jail. Oh, you son of a... That's not what you meant. That's what you know what you did, J.B. Allen, the Annihilator. I got to go. I got to do a preview for this game. I got a preview game to prepare for. I got to listen to Fat Lip and New Slang.